and welcome to this episode of Latitude, in which you're looking at the raging conflict between the Arabs and the Palestinians and their backers, the Hamas, in the Middle East, which has obviously become one of the most serious confrontations between Israel and the Hamas in particular, and the people of Palestine obviously suffering in it. We've seen thousands of rockets and airstrikes taking place. We've seen hundreds of people being taken dead, many more displaced, I believe more than 50,000. And the international community is still giving lukewarm messages to de-escalate. We have two experts with us. We have Professor Kumaraswamy from the JNU, who's a Middle East expert, and we have the one and only Middle Eastern correspondent in India, who's well informed and has the sentiments both with India and the Middle Eastern world, Dr. Awad. I'll start with you, Professor Kumaraswamy. You've written a fantastic article recently in the newspapers.
Thank you very much.
Explaining the various dimensions of the Israel-Hamas conflict. But two or three questions emerge from that. One is that you have mentioned that Israel is facing multiple challenges. Now, what are these multiple challenges other than the ones that Mr. Netanyahu is pointing his fingers at, that is essentially the guerrilla forces of the Hamas and their enormous firepower, which, though has not brought about the kind of deaths in Israel that the Palestinians are facing because of Israeli airstrikes, but obviously has been very unsettling for Israel. So could you explain that what are the enemies and the threats that Netanyahu sees other than his own political challenges at home?
Okay, thank you very much. The multiple challenges in the sense, previously Israel fought Gaza Strip with Hamas alone. I know that if you look at all the three times since Israel vacated from the Gaza Strip in 2005, in 2008 and 9, 2012 and 2014, it was between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But this time around, the conflict has escalated beyond the Gaza Strip. It has now, for the first time, you are seeing violence in the West Bank, which never happened in the last three times. It was relatively quiet. You did not even see demonstrations in West Bank, which indicated the distance between Fatah and Hamas among the Palestinians. But today, that is not the case. You see widespread protests in the West Bank. And that is not enough. You see protests within Israel. The Israeli Arabs have refrained from interfering in Palestinian intifada. They supported it politically, but they never took part actively. There are one or two exceptions, but otherwise the Palestinians expressed their opposition, but they never visibly demonstrated in violence. But today, what is happening is there is violence between the Israelis, the Arabs on the one side and the Jews on the other side. You have even seen arson attacks, desecration of graveyards, and destruction of a synagogue, and even lynching, which is something never happened in Israel's history from 1948. This is a very unprecedented. Because if you know, in all the countries, you can fight an enemy from outside, but fighting an enemy within is always a problematic.
Absolutely.
The Israelis finding it difficult to fight the extremists among the Jews and extremists among the Arabs, and that's the third part of it. The fourth dimension is there are rocket attacks from the northern side, from Lebanon and Syria. Fortunately, so far the numbers are very less, and also they are coming only from Palestinian elements in these two countries. Meaning, Hezbollah has not joined the war, or the pro and anti-Syrian forces in Syria have not joined the war. But in spite of that, you have four fronts. If this is not enough, you have even among the Jews, there is a difference. People who support Netanyahu, people who don't support Netanyahu. Both within the political context and in the context of forming a government. So if you look at all of them together, this is, one of the most difficult times Israel has faced since 1948. The crisis is not only with the other, but also crisis within.
Oh, well, not exactly a very happy situation for the international community to be able to do anything about it. I think the big question for them is, where is the starting point? Where do they begin the engagement with, other than Prime Minister Netanyahu, who doesn't seem to want to relent? I mean, if the latest messages that are coming in from all over the world, he seems to be standing up to even President Biden. And Professor Kumaraswamy, now here is a question which I think you're best placed to answer. There is an argument that India could be an honest broker in this entire conflict because India has always supported the Palestinian cause. Yasser Arafat, the number of times he came to India, was given head of state treatment. India recognized Israel in 1950, but started engagement with Israel with various diplomatic missions from 1992 onwards. Today, Israel is one of India's big defense suppliers. Mr. Modi and his Netanyahu seems to be close in more ways than one. So, do you think India could play a role, or is there the typical Indian reluctance? You want to keep out of mediation because then somebody will want to mediate on the Kashmir issue. And if not India, then who are the people who could be taking the place of the US? Because Mr. Biden has apparently indicated that he's had enough of these Middle East conflicts. America has had enough of it. America wants to move on. So could China become the one? Because China has explained that there is a hesitancy in the UN by one country to support the Chinese proposal of a two-state model. Or could the Russians come in as they came in Syria? Where do you think the answer lies?
It's very nice to hear that India has good relations with both the parties, so we could play a mediating role. It's an ego massaging. It's very happy to know we could play a role. My humble opinion, we do not have the capacity, not the diplomatic skill, not the political leverage, nor the wherewithal. So let's not even try that. It's very pleasing. And if relation is good enough, there are so many countries who have relation with Israel and Palestinians. We are not the only one. And if you look at all the countries which have an embassy in Israel, from Emirates, they can play a role. If that's a category, Emirates actually give you financial assistance to Palestine, which India could never even imagine. So let's not get into this. India simply cannot play a role, and we don't have the capacity. And playing a role means involvement at the prime ministerial level. It cannot be sent to some joint secretary in the ministry. It cannot be done. It will have to be done at the prime ministerial level to establish. And does our prime minister has the time for all these things? No, he is fighting for COVID constantly. So therefore, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the time, we don't have the expertise to do any of these things.
Good.
Even in Sri Lanka, we didn't mediate. Even in Nepal, we didn't mediate. Even in Afghanistan, we couldn't do it. These are all our immediate neighborhoods. Let's not go far away. Number one.
Good. I'm glad you've dismissed that argument, which comes very strongly by some academics and political scientists. And I wanted somebody of your stature to put it.
Because these are all very ego massaging trip. I can also play a role. It's like saying, I also have all the things. I can fight Mike Tyson type.
Well, that is a short summary of the history of the Arab world. But I think, to me, the bigger question is that I think we can only move forward if the UN becomes less toothless and the international community is serious about addressing it. But I think right now, all we are getting is platitudes. And until this conflict continues, we will see more discussions on the subject. But thank you very much, sir, for both your wisdom. And thank you very much for watching. And this is a subject that is the longest going on conflict in the world. And I don't think it's going to end tomorrow. Until our next episode, goodbye.